G'day people, it's Matt here from Matt Carve. So today we're going to carry on with carving this wood spirit, and we're going to get up to this point here. And what have I done? I have worked on the eyes, so I'm going to show you how to do the eyes. I haven't done the irises yet. I've just penciled them in with pencil, just to give you an idea of what they're going to kind of look like in the end. And we're going to work on this cheek. It used to look like this, very flat, but now we're starting to give it some definition. Looking pretty good. So that's what we're going to do today.
Okay, so what should we look at first? Maybe we'll just have a look at the eyes, and I'll give you a few pointers around the eyes, just on the sort of anatomy of it. So when we're looking at how wide they are, we could go off this thing, the photo that I printed off before. Okay, so if we look at the width of the eye, the nose, sort of like to the eyes, so we can go there, and then it's sort of there. And if you go a half point more, so it's about there, that's where the face falls away. And what I mean by that is bring some old friends back, is we've got this one here. And so you can sort of see that width of the eye, and then a half there, and then it really falls back. So that's it there, falling back on that man. He's falling back onto the ear. We can actually even look on the skull. So you can actually feel that bone there on your own face. And so that'll sit about there, and then like that. And then it'll fall back like that. So essentially that ring around there is kind of sort of like going around like that and down here like that. If that makes sense. It's good to leave this kind of bit here because you can always put hair in. So you can start making hair there. Whereas if you went right down to this, like made it really narrow, then you've got no options to put hair in. So that's always good to do that. So those are sort of like outside points. You can put like an inside point there. You can sort of like do a cross. Maybe the eye is going to go up like this, like that. So essentially what this part will be is you can turn those into bags. So I think a lot of the time people make their eyes really, really wide, but like those bags are like almost as the length of the eye. So I think I did it on this one as well. Yeah, so there you go. I've made bags on this one as well. So
okay, so and just draw in the eye on the other side, and the benefit of doing that is you can sort of get them sort of like looking symmetrical. So sort of like concentrate on the other side as you're drawing this side and sort of get those lines right, and then sort of have a look at them and see if they look good.
Let's have a look at how we carve the eye. So essentially what we're looking at here is, well, they're not completely flat. I'm not actually sure anatomically if they are super flat. But anyway, this is the way I do it. I kind of make it semi-flat, maybe like leaning out a little bit like that. But you can sort of see they're kind of like flat, like the pencil is flat on the face like that. So and we've drawn in sort of where the eyelids are. Now we want to take this part back and sort of form the eyelid. So what we're going to do is form that bit that goes into the sort of like the underneath of the eyebrow. That's what I tend to do first. So let's do that. And you can actually use different kind of burrs. I'm just going to say about this. So don't sort of like think there's only one burr you have to do the eyelid with. You could sort of do it with the kutzall fine taper burr, but the problem with that, well, it's good for at the start, and then you can sort of like move into finer burrs. And I got these first to start off with, and they're great. And you can sort of like almost go flat on it like that. Or this one, you can sort of go around like this, which is a nice way of doing it as well.
Okay, so we'll start off with that fine taper burr from kutzall, and as you can see there, I'm just sort of like angling it in So it goes inwards at the top and sort of like stays sort of outwards at the eye. So I was just sort of doing that, and it's really good that, but it's kind of like you can't add real detail. And like if you were just doing just a real basic eye, that's probably a good way of doing it. Okay, so now we've got the inverted cone burr on, and so we can add a little bit more detail on that. And it sort of gives a nice kind of like line at the top. So it sort of like indicates that kind of fold that goes into the skull. Yeah, so that's also a good way of doing it. And this pointed diamond burr is also a nice way of doing it as well. You just got to remember, just do real kind of light touches, especially with the smaller burrs, because they might tend to dig in a little bit more and leave sort of like little bumps instead of like a nice smooth kind of overall finish. Okay, and so a lot of people kind of think you only get kind of one chance to sort of like carve the eyes, but I kind of think like as long as you're not like committing with really deep cuts until you get the kind of general shape that you want, you could probably repeat it over and over again for a few times anyway, maybe 3, and that's what I'm going to do here. So let's just take this eye out and we will start again. Okay, so I'm going to draw the eye back in and start again, but I like a lot of people will be doing the other side at the same time, sort of like sort of every part they do on one side, they'll do it on the other side. I tend to do things very lightly on one side, and then I'll go to the other side when I'm happy with kind of like the overall kind of sense of it. And then when they're both kind of looking the same, I will go a little bit deeper on everything. So that looks pretty good. So you can also use several kind of burrs to put in the eyelid, the underneath of the eyelid, sort of like connecting to the pupil. And so I'm just using the inverted cone burr there. I'm sort of going over the eyelid as well, just trying to get things sorted out. Just sort of like a sense of like playing around until you kind of get it right. And the top eyelid I like to extend a little bit further than the eye, and the bottom eyelid will sort of like tuck underneath the top eyelid. I'll show you that as I do it. So that looks pretty cool. And now it's time to put on the bottom eyelid. Sometimes it's good to turn it upside down. And essentially we're just putting in the eyelids, and then we're going to sort of like carve the shape of the pupil inside the eyelids. And if you've got a steady hand, you can use the kutzall fine taper burr to take it back a little bit. You kind of want to take it back so it kind of looks like a sphere inside the actual eyelids, which is pretty, you know, to be honest, it's pretty hard at this size with the fine kutzall taper burr. Look, it's gone off camera. Typical cameraman. Too busy looking at the carving to worry about the video taking. Okay. Anyway, you kind of see what I'm doing there. Like that, the middle part is pretty easy with that kutzall burr, but like those going into the corner there, you're just going to like suffer a little bit. And you're sort of like turning your carving upside down and doing different areas, because it's always easier to carve one way than the other. That's still really kind of quite flat, so I'm not really happy with that. So we will endeavour to make it a little bit more spherical. But before I change burrs, I'll just work on that little bit of the eyelid that goes underneath the top eyelid. So the bottom eyelid sort of like you want sort of going a little bit more curved upwards under the top eyelid, and I tend to kind of try and put in the bag there as well. Okay, and one way to increase the sort of like curve on the pupil is to use sort of like a pointed diamond, but there's lots of different ways, but this is one way that I'll show you. So you sort of like hold it into the corner and sort of just sort of like move it slowly until that kind of corner goes into the eye. It's good to have a little brush, get rid of all that dust. And now I sort of use the face of the diamond bit to sort of like take off, sorry about the focus on that, sort of like take off bits to sort of like increase the curve of the pupil. Just be very careful here, just take your time. So you can sort of see that sort of increase the curve there.
Okay, so let's look at this eye so far, and to be honest, I'm not really happy with it. And one of the things that I think is not working is that lower lid is going down too far. It's sort of, lower lids tend to be, let's have a look at this guy. They tend to be quite flat along here, and this one goes up a little bit more. So I think, you know, we've still got options here. And what we could do is just take the whole lid out and then put it back in. Because in theory, like, if you look at it like this, these two lids, well, almost that lid is a little bit further back. So this lid tends to always sit. So you got the upper lid there, right? And the bottom lid should sit sort of like lower. Well, I didn't really draw that well. Sort of like that. It's a bad drawing, sorry. Okay, so your lower lid should be further back than your upper lid. So we can take that back. You know, you always got options, sort of like if it looks too sunken, we can always take all of this back. That's why I kind of like working on sort of maybe getting just the rough out of the eye first. So we've got that in, and then we can take this back. And so then we have kind of all of this area sorted out, and then we can start working on other areas. Even though we haven't finished this part or these parts, it's all sort of like relating to each other. And we can always sort of like change things as we go. Well, to a degree, you know. So there's sort of like something to be said for not going too hard out at the start. Until you're sort of like get really good at carving faces. I kind of think this maybe go up a tiny bit, and maybe that bottom one should be up here a little bit more. Because if you look at these ones, they're not actually that wide. Okay, so we'll do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to take this kind of portion out and take all of this back a little bit more. This will make our cheeks sit out a little bit more as well. We'll just see how that goes. Okay, so I missed out videoing the eyes being carved, and now we're up to this point. And what I really wanted to show you is the use of these burrs here and how to use them. Sort of get one of the biggest problems with carving eyes is getting that roundness. I'm going to show it. That roundness going over there. Sort of like you want your eye not to be sort of like this. You want it almost to be like this. What I'm going to do is I am actually going to show you on this carving, because I noticed that this part here isn't going back that far. So I'm going to take that a little bit further back just to show you how to do it. And when you're carving these kind of like eyes, say if you're carving these, you really want a steady hand. So like if I was like carving this, I would be going like this, and I'd be trying to like brace against sort of like the carving as well. Might put the carving on the table, things like that. And also, like you see a lot of people when they try and do this, sometimes the best thing you can do is do this when you're doing the other eye, and sort of go over it like that. It just seems to be easier as opposed to going like this over on this side. Especially when you've kind of got burrs like this, and you're doing, which is quite popular for these kind of eyes and carvings, and you're getting in there and you're doing that part, and then you can't really get in there. So you just turn it upside down and you can get in there just like the other side. What I've noticed though is when you're doing it, you've got to sort of like turn it back like this just to look at it to make sure it looks right. Because you could be going on a different angle because you're looking at it in a different way. Essentially, like this is quite a big eye compared to the other one, so I might use slightly bigger ones. And what I want to do is I want to go in and sort of go down into there and sort of round it off like this. And you're only doing it really, really lightly as well, because if you press hard, these burrs will dig in and they will leave marks. When I mean marks, I'll just show you quickly what I mean. Like that. So if we go lightly, it's sort of like taking it down very slowly. You can just sort of see I've taken it down a little bit. See that part there? That's the part that I left because that's not going to go into that area. So sometimes you might have to still go in with this burr and just get that little bit out, and that's fine. Or if you want to, you could sort of like maybe play around with a really small burr like that and get it in there. Let's do that. Let's do this really small burr. Okay, so you can sort of see I've taken that all out there, but we've still got that little bit there. We can get rid of that with that little fine burr, that pointy one. And we can actually turn the speed down of the Dremel for a little bit more control if you want. So I'm really, really gripping sort of like everything. I'm holding it in tight, sort of trying to get in there, because these are kind of like very intricate parts. So I quite like that, that's looking pretty good. Maybe I've taken a little chunk out of there. So what I'm going to show you too, I wanted to show you this, is with these T-shaped burrs, what you can also do is choose a relatively small one, but not too small. Now you need really sort of like steady hands for this one as well. And so what essentially we're going to do is we're going to go across the eyelid. I'm trying to get a good view of it here. Sort of like I'm going to go across the eyelid like that, while I'm trying to try not to stick that end bit into the pupil. Okay, so let's do that. but we're going to go actually under it. So essentially that part of the burr, I'll just show you on a bigger one. So essentially sort of like this part of the burr right here is going to go underneath the eyelid, but I don't want to go under too far. I just want to sort of like demarcate it. It's already been done a little bit, but we're going to like try and maybe do that bit there, just because it's sort of like it just looks solid through there. So we'll do that. Probably went a little bit overboard with the kind of like going under that and all that. You don't have to do that, but I was just sort of like showing you, you know, you can round off those bits like this and get quite a nice curve on the pupil of the eye. These burrs are really nice for that. So yeah, so just check out those burrs in the description. Okay, so I have just put this other eye in and it's pretty comparable, I think. Well, good enough anyway. And I've drawn in the eyes. I really like when you draw in the eyes how it sort of like takes in a bit more personality, so you can see it happening. And the reason why I draw in the eyes is just to get a kind of like a sense on how big the pupils need to be and all of that. But I might actually just leave putting the pupils in until later on, and we'll see how we go with that. So now I just sort of like thought I'd point out, a lot of people sort of like, well, I'm not saying a lot of people, but sometimes you see this forehead doesn't fall away on a lot of carvings. So essentially what happens is, sort of what you want to do is you want to have like a lot of distance there, and it's sort of like decreasing along here. Sort of if we look at this one, it's kind of happening there, sort of decreases along there as it falls away. And on this one as well, so we sort of have it falling away. And you can sort of see there's sort of like, even if you look at your own eye, there's sort of like the concave here, and then it goes out into like a convex there. So that's what we kind of aim for. It's kind of concave there, but when we round that off, it'll sort of like appear like that. Start taking that back a little bit there. Sort of like you can see here, they kind of fall away. It sort of goes out and then down. And that's a really nice place to put all the like wrinkles, sort of like going in there, like that, and then it'll fall away. And so if you're going to put in here, you kind of like want it to fall away into the here, and then we'll have some wood there to actually put here in.
Okay, so we're back using the kutzall sphere burr, the fine one, and sort of like taking it back slowly on that side, and just working it to sort of like see how it looks. And what we're slowly doing is we're going to be developing the cheek as well. And the best thing to do when you're carving the eyebrows is to actually carve around the eyebrows. So you're leaving material to sort of put the hairs in later on. And we're carving that cheek. It's sort of like that line going down there. You can sort of see it go down there and up there. And it's maybe not super correct towards the face, but it's sort of like looks good on a wood spirit anyway. So we're just sort of slowly developing that cheek, kind of rounding it off. Using the kutzall taper burr there. Just sort of like slowly taking it back and developing that cheek. Now I've left the other side just so you can sort of see how it's kind of developed. And you can sort of like get into the eye part as well and sort of make the cheek stick out a little bit more. All these really subtle kind of changes sort of like changes things quite a lot as well. So just be careful, don't go too fast. And sort of like get it up to a point that you really, really like. and sort of then start developing something else and just see if that works, and if it doesn't, sort of change it a little bit more. So we're coming up to the end of this video. We've worked on the cheek and the eyes and maybe a little bit of those eyebrows as well. So in the next one, we're going to work on the mustache and maybe the hair around the head. Let's do that on the next one. Hey, thanks for watching. And I think, well, these videos are very long and I really appreciate you watching them. If you made it up to this point, that's great. And if you could hit that like button and leave a comment. And if I've missed out anything, just let me know, or I could go over something again. Cheers for watching. Bye.